Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's installment of NACDA's virtual programming series. The COVID-19 pandemic has created anxiety, stress, and fear in our world, especially in athletics. It has not only impacted our routines and perhaps our motivation, but it has shaken many of us to the core, bringing feelings to the surface that we may have never experienced before, both personally and professionally. Today's session, how to manage low motivation and high anxiety within yourself and your teams, we'll discuss some tools and strategies to help you and those you lead manage the uncertainty and emerge from this pandemic with renewed motivation and purpose. We're excited to have Dr. Bhrett McCabe, clinical and sports psychologist and organizational behavior specialist, with us today to discuss these topics. Dr. McCabe combines his experience as a national championship winning athlete with his clinical training as a psychologist to help competitors in all arenas break free from their patterns of struggle, reframe their respective mindsets, and experience massive results. He's been trusted by the top athletics departments in our country, the most elite professional athletes across the NBA, PGA, and NFL, as well as many Fortune 500 organizations. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our live attendees joining us on Zoom that you can ask questions throughout the session using the Q&A feature and at the bottom of your Zoom window. Dr. McCabe will respond to as many questions as possible towards the end of today's discussion. Lastly, I'd like to thank Pacquiolin for their support through the years and especially as a sponsor of this session. Thank you all again for joining us today. And Bhrett, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. And I'm going to share my screen to make sure we get what we need here. And it should work there. It's an honor to be here. And I want to thank NACDA and everybody for the opportunity to come in and speak. And more importantly, to share kind of what we're going through right now. I think when this started back in February and March, what we thought September would look like is probably not what September is looking like. And that is realistic. And more importantly, that is kind of where we're at, right? But as a psychologist, specializing in the way that we think and the way that we behave and the way that we, look at things, this is no better time in our future. And any time that I can remember where this has been never more personal and most importantly, more developmental to what we can do to grow in our job and our role. I know the roles that you guys are in can be challenging. Your job is to bring calm and peace of mind to individuals in a chaotic environment. We're supposed to have answers for things that can't be answered. We're supposed to have solutions for problems that can't be solved. And people are looking to us because we know that sports and the element of what we bring to our communities is many times the greatest unification that we can have. We can take people from a variety of different backgrounds, different ideologies, different theories, different everything, but we can all root for the same people, or we can root against that hated rival, right? Sports are powerful. And so today what I want to talk about is how to manage that low motivation that we may be feeling, that high anxiety that I can guarantee we're all experiencing, but also what that means and what it looks like for our people that we lead and people that we're teammates with and our young student athletes who, let's be honest, at 18 to 22, they're dealing with a global pandemic and economic downturn that they've never seen. And I'm going to go through some experiences and some examples that we've gone through in the past. But it's important to note that particularly our young freshmen who are starting college for the very first time, this generation will never be forgotten for what they went through in their high school careers. Seasons cut shorts, no proms, suppers that look completely different. And our new normal is being defined on a daily experience. I am a clinical and a sports psychologist. I am trained in the mind and the way that the body and the psychological state, the medical and psychological work together. I did my training after I got done playing baseball at LSU. I was fortunate to be on 2 national title teams and a lot of other championships and be in the greatest baseball park you can play in at LSU. But that led me to wanting to know more about how the mind worked. So I did my PhD at LSU in what we call behavioral medicine, which is a component of psychology where you look at that interplay with the medical and the psychological. When COVID hit and the pandemic started, there was no time more for me to look back and say, let me go back to my clinical training here and let's bridge the gap of what we're doing. And I felt like it was somewhat of a calling, but more importantly, it was also an understanding that we can look at the uncertainty that we're facing in the world today and still find a way to push through, still find a way to grow, and still find a way to develop. Now, I do a lot of work with organizations. I worked in the pharmaceutical sector for 8 years doing strategy and design before I went back into the academic or the athletic world. And I'm fortunate enough to work with athletes all over the world. I'm the University of Alabama's consulting psychologist, and I also work with other universities around to help them manage, usually players in a one-to-one, but I love working with coaches and leaders to help them develop frameworks and programs to tap into the psychological abilities and power that our athletes have. So that's kind of where I focus on most of my work. As I said earlier, this is not alone. This is not the first time we've gone through something like this. I can remember being on internship in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown when 9/11 happened. We were in the epicenter between New York City and Boston. And I remember 2 or 3 days after 9/11 happened, they arrested a young man in the Amtrak Center in downtown Providence because they thought he was a suspected terrorist. We were on high alert, and the world of what we knew of safe travel was gone. For the first time ever, those core components of us were completely shaken. And if you remember, if you're old enough, you remember going to the airport immediately after 9/11 and standing in line for hours to get through security and seeing armed guards with very high powered rifles and machine guns and tanks waiting. My dad was military for 20 years, and I remember my mom and dad going through the base at Eglin Air Force Base, and there was a soldier on top of an armored tank pointing a gun, a large turret gun, at every car coming through the gate. And my mom asked my dad, "Do you think that's just for show?" And he said, "If his finger's on the trigger, it's not for show." That's the world we lived in. 9/11 rocked our security. It knocked our semblance. I can remember standing outside looking in the sky and not seeing airplanes. When was the last time that happened, right? Being from South Louisiana originally, this is Hurricane Katrina, right? And I remember when Hurricane Katrina rocked the southeastern coast and it destroyed the New Orleans area. Now we're going through the recovery of Hurricane Laura and tremendous devastation in Lake Charles, Louisiana. What an amazing place, and home of McNeese State and some of the other places that have been affected down there. But we look at that and you think, how are we ever going to return to normalcy? And it may have taken 8 or 9 years for New Orleans to really start rebuilding, but it's amazing. We always do. And I am a believer that regardless of what's going on the bigger, more national stage or what we hear about, the importance is each individual that we live with, each individual we work with, and each individual that we go to toe with and we work together with, we will rebuild what we lost. And it's going to be better than it has ever been. I believe in that. I believe we're going to change the way we're doing things. And I think more importantly, it's going to empower each and every one of us. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I've seen the histories of what we have in our world, and we always respond. Look, this isn't the most dangerous pandemic we've ever had in our world. The Black Death occurred. 60% of people seem to have died, up to 60% of the European population. You have the 1918 Spanish flu. You had the HIV and AIDS epidemic that killed 25 million Americans across the world during that time, and so on. And so right now, when we hear these numbers, one of the things that you have to remember is that when we're reading the media and we're seeing these numbers, while they're anonymous or they're not attached to an individual, we're somewhat removed, but because of social media, because of the news being on a 24-hour cycle, we internalize that as real. And we have probably lost loved ones that we know from COVID or have had other complications that have resulted from it. So it's real and it's legitimate. And what we have to do is focus on ourselves to realize that we will find a way through this. We will get better. When our kids went back to college, we saw the outbreaks. My daughter, who's 19, is a sophomore in college, came down with COVID. She went her 2 weeks quarantine, has now gone back. So it's real, and it's pretty much impacted every single one of us that are going through this. And you mix in that to the social changes that we're seeing across the country right now too. Not only are we having unrest with regards to COVID, but we have also seen a very needed change in the way that we approach some social justice issues in this country. And that has impacted us on the college level. Not only are we dealing with COVID, but we want to make sure we get the right voices out and progressing and changing the world in a healthy and equitable way, right? But not only are we dealing with one, now we have another that are very important. And I'm not downplaying either one of them. What I'm saying is they're hitting at the same time. And for many people, that becomes a time of suffering. When we see the world that we're living in right now, we don't see positivity. We don't see number of people recovered. We don't see number of people not hospitalized and treated at home. We don't see number of people going back to work. All we hear are some of the fearful based approaches that we have. And that wears on us. The world has been turned upside down, right? But it's really turned in such a way that is remarkable. Who could have ever, as I said before, imagined this? And what happens is, for a lot of us, the uncertainty and the unknowing hurts us more and more. When we've had economic downturns and you see banks failing, it's, oh my gosh, is there going to be another bank to fail? And then it goes to, what's next? What's next? But once we understand what's next, can't break us. We have a chance to succeed. But just this past week, we saw the University of Utah and other organizations having to furlough staff. And this speaks right to the core of why you're here. I can imagine the fear, the worry, the uncertainty of making a living, making an impact. My fear about us furloughing staffs as a psychologist dealing with patient care and client care, what happens then? Well, I'm still going to provide services, right? Because I have to. But we have men and women across this world whose families are entrusting us to take care of them, to provide them with a future, to feed them, to educate them, to provide them housing in a safe environment from the social justice concerns we have out there. We want to insulate them, but we also want them to improve. The risks that we have during this time of making cutbacks, what's the future going to hold? Are we ever going to do this again? I mean, those are the thoughts that pop in my head at 2:00 in the morning. We've gone through COVID. What are we going to do the next time something rolls up? Are we going to react are we going to have to react in this dramatic of way? Maybe. I'm not sure. We don't know. It's completely unprecedented. I've tried to educate my teams and my organizations that really what we're going through are three major phases of COVID-19 quarantine. The first thing that we did is we went into the endurance. And the endurance was the phase where all of a sudden we went from full go to no go. And I was working on the PGA Tour at the Players Championship. I know many of my baseball friends and softball friends on track and field were at events, and all of a sudden they're being bussed back home. And it was a domino effect of decisions that were having to be made with no precedence, as I've said many times. And we all of a sudden all went in lockdown. It was a crazy time. And it was weird to see restaurants shuttered. It was crazy to not be able to go to places and to have to wear a mask and all the different things. And that was the endurance phase. And I would like to think that as we're moving into more phased reopenings and we're going back on college, that we've left the endurance. But really during that time, there was a lot of uncertainty. And what's the next shoe to drop? But more importantly, there was that fear and a lot of anxiety. Psychologists are really concerned right now about the burgeoning, the explosion of mental health needs that are coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. And I'll give you some resources at the end to help out there. But I want to think we're in the emergence phase right now, where we're returning to work. We're returning to training. We saw some college football games being played. But you also saw a school last night at Navy who played a game, and the coach after the game said, we didn't tackle or touch anyone, and it showed, right? These are just such weird times to do things in such unique ways that we just don't know how to respond. And as a result, the excitement to return sometimes results in a lack of discipline. But what also happens is you have coaches and you have administrators, you have fans who not only do we want to get back playing, but not only we got to win, we got to do it right. And so there's that little bit of a conflict there. But we have to use the struggles during the emergence for building blocks, because the last phase to me is the execution phase. And that's when we seem to kind of get back into maybe third or fourth gear. We're starting to go now. We're starting to move. And we know we're going to have reemergence. We know we're going to have periods of pockets of infection rates. We're going to have bad news happen. But instead of reacting to it, what we need to do is be prepared to respond to it. Struggles are obstacles, right? That's the biggest fear we have is, oh my gosh, here's another struggle that we got to go through. But instead, be prepared for everything so you're not surprised by anything. What I want us to understand is that emerging from the endurance and emerging into the execution phase is like climbing a mountain, right? We can all see the top of the mountain. We want to get to Everest. We want to know what it takes to be on top and to defeat this and to feel proud and to feel excited. But over time, you get out there and the excitement wanes, goes away. And what happens is you get midway going. It's like, man, this stinks. This is hard. I don't have access. I can't bring my athletes in. I can't do this, what I normally do. I mean, who would have thought we'd all be doing virtual stuff all the time, right? So you're seeing this growth just continuing to build up, but eventually we'll get to the top. And when we get to the top, we're going to celebrate and we're going to be success. We're going to feel successful. We're going to feel pride and we're going to forget those little struggles that happen along the way. But those little struggles are going to help us. So my point to this is with each step that we go along, every struggle and obstacle that we face, every challenge that we experience, I want us to be careful. I don't want to make it bigger than it is. It's a piece of data. It may be 2 or 3 pieces of data together, may look like a trend, but it's not everything. We have the ability to still get to the top of this mountain, to still do the things that we're called to do in this industry, to still serve our college athletes, to still serve our colleagues, and still put out a great, great future by developing men and women to have success across many different avenues. If it wasn't for my experience in college, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. Okay. I'm 48 years of age and I still rely on a daily basis to my coach's lessons. And in fact, I keep a book of his lessons on my desk every day that a colleague in my field wrote. And I review it on a regular basis. Don't ever forget the impact that you, each and every one of you, are as a catalyst for other people's success, to be their guide to get to the top of the mountain, to help them understand what they can overcome and what they can push through. And when the things get tough, don't forget that many times we want to push, but sometimes as a catalyst, the simplest thing that we can do is just say, I believe in you. I believe in each and every one of you to be the guiding light when it gets hard. And there's an old saying, if you feel helpless, help someone. And if you've lost hope, bring hope to another. Don't ever forget those words. See, the human mind has 3 major drivers that happens to every one of us. Okay, and this is important. Now let's take away the need for stability or the need for shelter or the need for food. Okay, that's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that I'm supposed to know as a psychologist, but just could never really learn. But true story. But I want you to understand there's 3 major drivers that we all face, kind of like high-level psychological stuff. And these are my experiences that I've seen at working with the best of the best. Number 1, we all want to succeed at something. Nobody wakes up and goes, I want to be dead last, right? Like I'm excited to be below average. No, we want the excitement to win something, right? If you go to Las Vegas and all those bells and whistles and those ding, 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 ding that are running in the background, they're tapping into the core of your human brain and your reward system. We want to feel accomplishment, but we want stability in life. We don't want to risk knowing anything. And even in COVID and even in the social unrest, there is stability of knowing that what we see is our standard. It doesn't have to be good, but at least it's known. And the last thing that we really want is we want social acceptance. We want to be liked. We want to be valued. We want to be appreciated by the people that we serve, the people that we're around, right? But the balance is critical. See, where we lose our way is that when we allow our social acceptance to be fulfilled by what we accomplish, or we think that winning is going to drive success and stability. And that's, I think, one of the things that COVID is going to expose, particularly within universities and athletic departments, is that sound practices and solid decision-making can sustain the wins and the losses because the foundations are in place to drive each and every one of these. We can be accomplished, we can win, we can have a stable and predictable environment, and we can be accepting of one another. Now, we have to balance between the two of us and each and every one of us, between our desires and our fears. That's a challenge. We live our life between purpose and prevention. And if you think about the number of decisions that you make in the course of a day, how many of them are preventative? Don't want this to happen. Don't want that to happen. We got to prevent that. Versus how many of them are purpose driven? I want us to live our life and execute from a purpose driven mindset with respect for what could happen. I don't want to be reckless. What I want to be is have the motivation and the achievement working together to compete for an outcome. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a minute. But fear is always around the corner. And in a time like this, our fear centers in our brain are unbelievably primed and amped and hyped. Okay. And I think what we have to look at is the importance of what we're doing is to realize that it's always this balance between competitiveness and purpose and fear and doubt. So let's kind of talk about each of them real quick. Okay. We all want to accomplish something, right? That's why we have trophy cases. We see the shining. But what we forget when we look at our accomplishments is we many times forget the struggles that we overcame to get there. When I talk to athletes, I hear commonly, well, I remember when I used to. Yeah, I remember when I did this. Oh, I remember when I did that. And they forget a very key component. They forget those moments of doubt and insecurity that they pushed through, that they faced, they worked around to achieve the success. Every great championship is formed by many moments of struggle and many moments of resiliency and grit. We've got to work to push to achieve, and that's what makes the success so powerful. But the problem with success is it's short-lived in our brain. Every great success, somebody asks, how can we do it better? And what sticks with us is not success, but struggle. When we don't have success, struggle is showing us on a daily basis where we're falling short. We've got to remind ourselves what successes we have. We've got to celebrate the successes in our lives. We got to have a brag sheet that we used to call in corporate, right? You got to have a sheet that says, these are the good things I've done. And I encourage each and every one of your organizations to start off every meeting and end every meeting with accomplishments. It's not always the dangerous to-dos. Let's celebrate the victories. There are some great things. Take the time to reinforce those because accomplishment speaks to us at the behavioral level, but also at the biological core, right? So why, when it gets hard, do you keep pushing? Why, when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up, why do we do this, right? I used to dream when I was in college and graduate school that maybe I'll just go get a job mowing fairways at golf courses. I love to wake up early and see the sunrise, and I love to look behind where I've just driven and see the progress, right? That to me was so logical. And in life, pretty much most people who are winners and want to win, we want to see logical, progression of our achievements. But life doesn't work like that, right? We celebrate the little ones and we discount them and we go focusing on the big ones. We got to return to what our motivation is. We got to return to what drives us. Why? Why do you do this? Why do you serve your college athletes? Why do you serve your boosters? Why do you serve your university? What is the drive that makes you tick? It's not many times what you're going to see on a billboard, but it could be the fact that you do it to see if you can. There are two types of motivation sources. You have the internal and the external, intrinsic and extrinsic. Okay. I'm not one to say that the extrinsic doesn't work. Okay. The outside, finances, trophies, championships, flashy trophy cases, national title rings, admiration, media, all those work, but they're short term. They only last because we can't keep them coming fast enough to make us excited. Believe it or not, if I put you in front of a nonstop paying slot machine, you'll get bored with it because the reward is just too predictable. You'll say, okay, there's got to be something bigger there for me. But what we need to do is tap into what makes us tick on the inside. That's what amps us up. Our freedom to choose and to focus, our deeper purpose, and then most importantly, that feeling when we master something. But are we in a world right now where mastery is almost impossible? So we're having to ride the wave versus fight the waves of life. So why do you do what you do? Each and every one of you gets into this business for a reason. It may have been cool. It may have been fun, or you may have just wanted to stay around athletics. I get that, and I understand every bit of that, but it's deeper than that. And you've got to take this time with this uncertainty to really understand why you do this, and more importantly, how you can continue to do it better. Eddie Reese, as a coach, said the hardest skill to acquire in the sport is the one where you compete all out. You give absolutely everything that you have, and you still get beat. But the killer instinct is coming back to fight through that. See, I think the problem that we have in our world is we want so much certainty. And this generation of athlete, I want you to understand this. This generation of athlete has a major issue. I'm not knocking the millennials or the Gen Zers. That's not what I'm saying. But because of social media, because of comparisons, think about their comparative group. It's no longer their kids in their neighborhood or their regions or maybe their state. I can remember graduating high school in the spring of 1990. And I didn't know everybody that played on my all-state team. Now these kids, they're looking national or international as their comparative group. So if they are comparing against the national and the international, they're really comparing themselves to the outliers. Those outliers aren't normal. Okay? Serena Williams is not normal. Bryce Harper is not normal. Tom Brady is not normal. Michael Phelps is not normal. They're outliers. So what happens is they see that and they fail. And it creates a vulnerability inside them that is scary. And that vulnerability is maybe I'm not good enough. Well, the result is the problem. So if they fear they're not good enough, I believe that this generation always holds back something. They always hold back something. Because the biggest fear they have is they gave everything they had and still fell short. If that's the case, then they hold back. I don't think it's consciously, I think it's subconsciously. So that way, if they fail, they know that there was something else they could have given. I think we all do that too. It's really hard to lay it all on the line, to put your heart out on the table, and it might get crushed. But really, that's the best. That is when we are at our best, is when we lay it on the line, we give our heart and our soul, and we pick ourselves back up. But that comes with a stress. My biggest area of research through grad school was on stress. Stress is anything that requires us to respond to it. There's some positive stress, but packing to go on vacation is very stressful, particularly if you have kids. Okay. Stress is anything that we have to respond to. The problem with stress is that over time, it's not just the big major stressors that's the problem. It's the accumulation of the small stressors that just build up in us over and over and over again. And they wear us down psychologically and physically. We know the research. If you have medical conditions and stress in your life, you are at risk of continued problems. Okay? Your medical numbers will be at risk. You won't sleep as well. You don't recover as well. You don't think as well. But we go, it's just stress. Like coaches and athletic department personnel, being stressed out is not a sign of efficiency. It's not a sign of a great coach because somebody stayed at 9 o'clock at night and got back up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not a sign of a great coach. That's a sign of a coach that's going to crash, or an athletic department personnel that's going to crash because they have too much on their plate and they don't know how to separate themselves from the demands of their life. I'm not saying that we have to work a 35-hour work week. What I'm saying is we have to learn to buoy ourselves and to protect ourselves against the stress of our life. Many of us, we push towards our successes at the expense of ourselves and our families. And that's the greatest buffers that we actually have to stress is our family. So we need to be careful with stress. As I said, we looked at the desire side. We want to compete, but the fear side is what builds and contributes to that stress. Uncertainty is one of the greatest stressors that we have in anything in life. We crave stability. We crave certainty. And when we take the world and we shake it up like a snow globe and there's chaos all around us, it is exhausting. We have to be ready and understand that the struggle that we're in right now is uncertain. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We never do, but now we're more evident to realize that there are more risks. The future is always uncertain. I want you to understand that. We never know what tomorrow will hold. Uncertainty, though, does drive anxiety. The more uncertain we have, the body has to respond with anxiety. Anxiety is nothing more than energy, but it's energy in relationship to a threat. So the anxiety is doing what the body does. And over time, it's adaptive until it's not. And what happens is we don't focus on normal things the right way anymore. Nobody celebrates airplanes landing safely. Nobody celebrates the 43rd college football game. Nobody celebrates your athletes making A's. Nobody celebrates the community service of our athletes. Nobody celebrates great jobs because that's normal. See, anxiety and uncertainty drive us to focus on the things that we don't do well, the struggles and the variances. We got to be careful not to fall for that. Over time, anxiety leads us to fear. The what if? And it's a primal response. If a bear jumped out at you, you would respond in a fear-based manner, right? It's increased arousal at every component of the mind and the body. That's good. That's normal, right? It's protecting you to either run or fight that bear. But what bears do we have in our lives? What bears? We have uncertainty. See, there's two types of people in our world, reactors and responders. Reactors see that fear and that threat on the horizon, and their job, their brain, their psychology goes, protect yourself, don't screw up, don't mess up, don't make a mistake, just survive the stress. And as a result, reactors are people who just only see things in a certain way. Get out of the problem, get out of the problem, get out of the problem. Responders, however, see the risk on the horizon, and they use it as a way to make themselves better, more efficient. They ask the hard questions. What are we doing, and can we do it better? We may wear this one. This one may hurt, but we will improve because of it. See, fear's not bad. Now, don't do this, what this guy's doing. Okay, but fear's not bad. Fear is something you got to learn to face. And the only way through fear is facing it. If we can't resolve that anxiety, though, what happens is it builds. We have an epidemic on today's college campuses. I called this 10 years ago when, actually 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I called my old coach who was the AD at LSU, and I said, Coach, you need to put a psychologist on staff. And his answer was, oh, geez, that's going to be a lot of money. Look at the money that we're investing in the mental health of our athletes today, and rightfully so. Okay, it's a changing of the guard, but you're going to see more and more investments being made on the college campuses because we are more stressed and anxious than ever before, and our kids are entering college absolutely stressed. Think about the demands that these kids have coming through high school. They're many times living in unstable environments, and now they're going to be coming from environments that have been impacted by COVID, where their parents are going to have financial concerns. They're going to have uncertainty about their job futures. And a lot of the investment and time is being placed on the wellness and the success of their children. But I remember when I was in college, I had a couple of kids in my high school. I went to an all boys, academically strong high school. And we didn't have any, I think the highest ACT score, I think was a 33. Now it's not uncommon to have multiple perfect scores. A 27, a 28, a 30 is kind of average. You kidding me? Wonder why these kids have anxiety. 1 out of 4 are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, but I would say 4 out of 10, 2 out of 5 are dealing with it. I would say over 50% of the kids that I see, even though I'm not doing clinical work anymore, are still presenting with a primary driver of anxiety. And the issue with anxiety is it runs together about 70% of the time with depression. We have to be careful on our college campuses. We can't assume that our athletes do not suffer. And we can't see our suffering of ourselves as if it's like an outlier situation. No, it's the norm. It's not the outlier. Student athletes are almost at the same rate of anxiety and depression of the general population of students. And I'm going to shock you when I say this. I actually think athletes have a greater suffering than the traditional students. because for many, they've been overlooked, passed through, and told just to suck it up until they get to college. Okay. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's reality. So I find that my athletes tend to have more suffering than my general population students. Anxiety, just like stress, hits us at many, many different ways. And what you have to understand is that there's a normal anxiety and there's an anxiety disorder. The number one factor is, does it cause impairment in your life? Normal anxiety is good to face the uncertainty, and you should be anxious right now. So feeling anxious right now is normal. But if it's impacting your ability to have a family, it's impacting your ability to communicate with your loved ones, to find joy in your day, then it may have gotten to a spot where it's causing impairment. That's when it moves into the world of an anxiety disorder. And we can help with that. That's what we're trained to do. But the thing you have to realize is that when we can't resolve what we're working through, we worry. And worry leads to anxiety because it's unresolved. We have to face the things that we're worried about. We have to use this time to develop our strategies to get better. We all have doubt. The most successful leaders that I've ever worked with have doubt. They face their internal enemy on a daily basis. They don't see doubt. They don't see fear. They don't see anxiety as a negative. Instead, they face the internal enemy of doubt. And they start developing strategies around their successes. There's a great book that you should read. And it's a book about Ernest Shackleton. And he led the greatest maritime disaster ever. Okay, really weird to say. But if you read a book called The Endurance by Caroline Alexander, it's absolutely brilliant. Every leader should read this book. Just to give you a background, the goal was he was funded by the Queen of England, I think at the time, maybe Germany and Italy as well, to be the first to cross Antarctica and stake a claim on it. Why, I don't know, but they wanted to. It's kind of the last frontier, right? And so he got his crew of men and he leaves the South Georgian Islands in December 5th of 1914. Okay. He enters the ice pack of Antarctica on December 7th, so 2 days later. He gets trapped a month later. And then 9 to 10 months later, that trap results in the boat crashing, cracking, and then in November it sinks. Okay. During that meantime, he had pulled all his men off on the ice float, and they had to make hard decisions. He actually faced a mutiny. But those decisions were made with the betterment and the success of each individual that he was working with. So he makes a decision to say, look, we can't stay on the ice flume anymore because it's summer down there, right? Even though it's not really summer. They launched boats for Elephant Island. Elephant Island sounds great, but what it really is just a rock-inhabited island of penguins. Penguins are not the best thing to eat, but he had to feed his 24 men. So once he gets back on April 9th, he devises a plan. And his plan is he's going to take one of the small boats with 4 of his men, and he's going to sail back to the South Georgia Islands. The problem is that's 750 nautical miles. And the guy that led the mutiny against him was his lead navigator. He had to trust the person who wanted him overthrown. The thing about a navigator in the open water is if you miss by 1%, you miss the islands altogether. And yet he hit the islands. He left his crew behind and he hit the islands. But kind of like 2020, if we're going to do it, we're going to have a struggle, right? So he hits the wrong side of the island, the mountainous side, in the middle of a storm. And he has to cross the islands. So he and 2 of his men decide to leave and leave the other guys at the boat. They have to climb the mountains that have never been climbed by anybody before. They climb the mountain. They come walking in like 2 weeks later. And they walk into the whaling station. Everyone thought he had died 2 years later. And instead, they were able to rally a crew to go to Elephant Island. And when they showed up, no man had died. It's the greatest example of leading through uncertainty based on the decisions that were made. It wasn't about Shackleton. It was about making the decisions that made each one better, to celebrate the accomplishments that we have, to develop a plan, to realize that we are reactors and not responders. We're responders and not reactors. So you have the power to control your mind, but never the outside events. If you can understand this, you'll have great success. So let me give you a couple strategies for managing some stress and anxiety in your life. Number 1, you need to have the conversations. You must face you and face the person in the mirror. Be willing to look at yourself and realize it's okay to be who you are. In fact, you're pretty damn special. I love a quote by Mel Robbins, who's a motivational speaker. Her statement is, you're undefeated facing the hardest days of your life. Doesn't mean there aren't days that you crack and there aren't days you need help, but reach out. We're here for you. I stole this from a colleague of mine, Dr. Kevin Chapman, who was the sports psychologist for University of Louisville for many years, and now he's in private practice. He said, if we want to survive COVID, we need to fight the fight. So let's talk about it. The F is, let's focus on what you can control. Don't get caught up in the drama. Don't get caught up in the, the what if out there. Focus on what we can control. It's a great time to eliminate media and social media that we just don't need. One of my professional athletes was spending a couple hours with me this morning, and he changed his entire Instagram feed to motivational quotes. He said, instead of looking at the drama and the trauma in the world, I can look at what's making me better. There's some power to that. We need the eyes. We need to look at things and look at our insight. We got to gain insight, right? The insight is, how do our views see the world? See, negative views about the world lead to negative views about our future. Negative views about our future lead to negative views about ourselves, and so on. We got to change our scope. I will survive. I will endure. I will make this. And repeat that on the loop. We got to gain mental flexibility. We got to help them get better and see the growth of what we're doing. Mental flexibility is kind of like riding the waves versus fighting the waves. Believe that you can do that. We got to develop healthy behaviors. 15 to 30 minutes a day, y'all. Go for walks. Get up, move. Read something you want to read. Life does not have to live you. Live life. You are not at its discretion. There are times that it needs your full attention, but 15 minutes is 1% of your day. Please find 15 minutes a day. Get up, take a shower, exercise, show up. If you have a negative viewpoint, put a mirror on your desk and look at your frown and the stress. Call a colleague, talk about it, work. Then teach somebody what you have learned. That's the T. Share. Athletic department, share positive news. Don't get caught in the rut that everything sucks, because we don't. We're better than that. We got to fight this fight. So how do we stay motivated, right? Okay. One of the things that has helped me in my life more than you can know is that when I feel anything, I assume that they're just thoughts. They're just feelings. I don't judge them. I don't get angry about being angry. I don't get scared about being scared. I don't get happy about being happy. If I have a negative thought, it's just like the clouds in the sky. They don't mean anything. I studied what thought is. Thought is nothing more than energy that is used to identify threat. You may process information. It may solve a problem in front of you, but for the most part, it results and pushes us to jump into things that are stressful. It is like having a thought radar. Make a list of things to do every day. 5 or 6. Get them done. The check off of the box feels so good. Remember, what's that one thing we want? Accomplishment? Yep, did that. Yep, did that. Brilliant. Okay? Live for now. Now is amazing. We don't know what tomorrow holds. If you get to go to practice, immerse yourself in that. The next time a student athlete is sitting in your desk, in your room, in your office, embrace the moment. Because there was a time recently when we can't do that. When we can take our masks off and see people's smiles, embrace those. See the greatness that we all rely on to change the way we're looking. And this is one of the greatest lines ever, right? Embrace the suck. Stop fighting it. Things do suck. COVID sucks. Okay? Prejudice sucks. Racism sucks. Let's change it. Let's change it. Let's start by building a better future for the people by seeing the fact that we are undefeated right now. We will endure this. I got an offer for each and every one of you, and this is important. Okay. I put together an ebook for this talk, and it's how to manage the stress and uncertainty in times of chaos. Look, I went to LSU. It's not hard to read. Okay. And so I wrote it in a way that can really, really help you. But here's how you get it. It's completely free. There's no hook. You just got to text on your machine, on your computer or your phone, where it says the number 2. Just put in 66866. Now you have to have an American-based phone line. If you're coming from outside the United States, I'm not responsible for what comes back to you. But in the number, the 2, you just put 66866. In the subject line, you just type in the word MIND, MIND. What will happen is when you hit send, it'll bounce back and ask you for your email. Put in your email, and this thing will be given to you immediately. Okay? No other hook. We'll probably send you a note or two to see how you like it. Other than that, you can unsubscribe at any time. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I want to give you this book. This is my calling in my life. And COVID was that moment when I sat in my office and I didn't know what to do. I believe in each and every one of you. I know the power that the athletic department personnel had for me. I work with some amazing ones at the University of Alabama, consulting at Samford and things like that. My Alabama family means a lot to me. I know what they're going through to put a great escape on the field. I remember that first baseball game after 9/11 when President Bush walked out to the Yankee Stadium and threw a strike, and how it bonded and unified our country. We need to get back to that. We're the vehicles for that. There's a burden with it, so I want to help you. If you're Canadian and you want to get this, what I would tell you is we will send a link out. Let me put this in the chat. You could send an email to Basham, and it's his birthday today. Bhrett Basham is one of my teammates in my office, and just so you guys know, Bhrett Basham played baseball at Ole Miss. I played at LSU, so we always have a nice little rivalry. But he also was in leadership at University of Alabama for 5 years, so he understands the NACDA world very closely. So I'll turn it over to questions now. If you want to type in your Q&A, you can. If you want to get in touch with me, please follow me on social media. That always helps. If anything else that you guys have, I'm happy to answer, and I'm always around for you. Okay, here's a question that just came in, and I'll read it. Right now, there's a feeling that power is greater than you are controlling the outcomes, be it Mother Nature, fires, hurricanes, or our leaders. Our anxiety is tied to the belief that those are in charge are on the same page as us, and we're not up to the challenge. And the nature doesn't allow us to do those things that helps relieve that stress. It's not a question, but more of a thought. I don't disagree with you. And when we survey Americans, I'm just going to talk about Americans here for a minute. Many times we put our stress in our decisions that are made in Washington. It doesn't matter the political party. This isn't a political statement, because it's out of our control. Decisions are made at levels so much greater than us. But what we have to do is we have to change the scope. We can't make a decision what sports are going to be played. Is volleyball season going to play? Are we going to have to do this or that? But given the circumstances that are on the table right now, we need to have contingencies in place of what we can do. One of the things that every one of us can do, despite the fact we don't know what's going to happen, is we can reach out to every student athlete we have. One of my coaches, I did a couple webinars early on. One of my coaches took it on head on and said, I'm going to write a letter to every one of the players that I've coached in my career, and sat down and wrote a handwritten note to every player that they had crossed paths with and mailed them. That's taking control. Many times we get caught up on things that we can't do, and we ignore the things that we can do. Right now in the athletic, I wouldn't be afraid to encourage you to reach out to 5 people a day to make decisions and some contingency plans. Look beyond. Look on the horizon of what may be out there. And you may not ever need them, but you might. And so while decisions are being made in agreement with us or in conflict with us, I don't disagree. I wonder some of the decisions that are made are too soon, and I wonder if some of them are in a situation where maybe there's something else at play. I mean, you can't help but question that, right? But at the same time, they didn't ask us. And what we need to do is focus on the things that we can do. Let's look in our 6-foot window a little bit. Let's look at our 1 degree of separation around us and influence those individuals to the best of our abilities. How do you maintain a positive attitude and focus on silver linings without being insensitive? Such a hard balance right now. Correct. Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, read anything that she publishes. She has a great piece on empathy. And the empathy side is I can be excited, but I can also understand. And I want to know more about what you're going through. I'm normally very positive. That's just who I am in my life. And I can understand that it may rub people the wrong way. So I have to be careful. So one of the things that I try to do is I try to ask people what they're going through. Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking. Many times, once people get the first or second issue out, their anxiety and their stress goes away. Have you ever stayed up at night all night and thought you couldn't go to sleep because you had 47 things in your head? And when you wake up or you go write them down what you have to do and you look at it the next day, it's like 3 things. Very simple. A lot of times the pain that we're suffering with are those 3 things, but it feels like 50. So even though you're positive, which is wonderful, and being negative isn't wrong, okay? But focusing on with them is tell me what you're experiencing can be a really, really big benefit. Okay, are there any other questions? One of the things that COVID has really, I think, done a brilliant job of, and I say that. Remember when COVID started and we were all sequestered to our houses, but you could go out and exercise? You saw people walking in the streets with their families. You saw people standing across the street talking to their neighbors. COVID took away, 9/11 took away our security. COVID tried to take away our human connection. The human connection will never go away. We have to reconnect to that. The name of the Shackleton book is The Endurance by Caroline Alexander. She was a National Geographic writer, so they have some of the original pictures, which is brilliant. Okay. I want to thank NACDA for this opportunity. I hope this is helpful. If you like the book, is this ebook a resource that we can share with us? Please do. You can share it with anybody you want. Share. We're all in this together. And I think we're at a spot right now where the more that we can talk about this and have open dialogues, and even you guys as leadership being vulnerable to our student athletes is critical. It's okay to say, I don't know, and I'm ticked off about it. You don't have to put on the facade that everything's okay. And you don't want to walk around and be Debbie Downer either, but it's okay to mention what we're doing. How do you see the virtual world fitting in the future? That's a great question, and thank you. I think we're going to shift. I'd be really worried if I owned a lot of corporate real estate in today's world, right? We found a way to connect in many different ways. We found a way. I mean, our young generation, they may not hang out with their friends, but they play video games with them and they have full conversations while they're playing video games, right? So to them, they're highly connected. We're shifting our connections. We're shifting our virtual. We know the psychological benefit of having our kids in schools. It's huge. But I think you're going to see more virtual adaptations that are moving with and in that environment. And I think for us to do that in the teaching environment and the coaching environment, I don't know if maybe some of our programming that we do on the college campus is going to go virtual anyways. And instead of having them come over to the athletic department, they can all dial in on Zoom. This generation, 95% of my client care that I give is all remote. They prefer to sometimes be remote. So I think we, as sometimes the older generation, is learned to be much more technologically savvy and aware, so that it's not a barrier to us. You know, one of the things that I have found with my athletes is that they text me a lot more than they call me. And this doesn't mean that they want to avoid me. It's just they communicate better. So we have to constantly look on how we're going to adapt and involve that. And I think virtual education and virtual connections can work in a much more effective manner without people having to be on the clock of what time they can come and what time they can leave. I think you're probably going to see down the road too much more virtual integration of televised sports too. That's just a guess of mine. Chat rooms or stuff like that can engage the fan when they're even not in the room. Okay. All right. Well, I'll turn it back over to you guys. And Bob, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to kill my share here. Okay, Bob.
Thanks, Bhrett. Really appreciate you taking time. It's really special to not only hear your message, but also hear it from a former student athlete. It's your unique way of giving back, and we can't thank you enough for doing this. And thank you also for your gracious giving us the book, which all we have to do is text to 66866, and we'll be able to get your book online. So we really appreciate that. And again, thank you. And to all the members out there, thanks for being with us today, and look forward to next week's session. And until then, be safe out there. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.
Thanks.